Hey, Fringe listeners, we're sharing a favorite episode with Susan Linder today from her show, The Innovation Storytellers. We hope you love this episode like we do. If you do, follow the show. We'll link it in the show notes.
Great innovation stories make change possible. Each week on the Innovation Storytellers podcast, I invite innovation leaders to share how they overcame the obstacles to introduce breakthrough ideas to the world through the power of story. I'm featuring guests from Tesla, TD Ameritrade, Corning, Cisco, Bloomberg, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can tell a more effective innovation story and change the future for the better. Hey everybody, it's Susan Linder, your host of the Innovation Storytellers show. And today is going to be a conversation about creativity from one of the most creative companies in the world. I'm joined today by Chris Duffey, who is globally recognized as the leading figure in the design of digital experiences using emerging technologies. With more than 25 years of experience, he has collaborated with some of the largest multinational corporations, not to mentioning an opening keynote with Kim Kardashian at a recent Cannes Festival event. And he is also known as a strategic futurist and authority on growth prospects for brands, organizations, and society through tech and creativity. Chris spearheads the development of Adobe's Creative Cloud strategic partnerships and has recently published a fantastic new book, which we're going to get into as well. He is also an expert on all things Metaverse, how we're going to diffuse that a little bit from Web3, blockchain, NFTs, DeFi, crypto, AR, VR, generative AI, the whole spat. If you want to know about these topics today, we're going to get deep in the next 30 minutes into this conversation. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining me. And I want to start this conversation getting to the heart of creativity, data, and storytelling, which is why we're really all here. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this intersection of creativity and innovation at Adobe.
Great. Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Thank you for the kind introduction. And, I think a shout out to you as well. I think, we were just talking off screen. You're doing some amazing work. So thanks for helping advance the infusion of creativity in a very somewhat analytical world at times. Looking forward to speaking with you. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I had a multicultural home where my father was Irish, my mother was Mexican. So I think from looking back from a very early age, I was always fascinated with these unexpected contrasts coming together and the power when you connect the dots in unexpected ways. Throughout university and then my early career, I really gravitated towards that. I went to a traditional 4-year college, liberal arts, but at nighttime I would go to art school. So I would always say, during the day I wore a polo shirt, at night I would put on the black t-shirt. So almost a very early introduction into right brain, left brain thinking, which has been medically debunked, but it's a nice metaphor for kind of these convergence of two ways of thinking.
Yeah, but both of them get you excited, right? About whatever's happening in the humanities and whatever's happening in the world of creativity. So that's great. So you get to Adobe, right? You're working in the field, you're working in advertising, right? And you are bringing together these worlds of creativity and technology. That's been kind of like the hum, right? That underlying mantra going on in your life. And how do you get to Adobe?
So my early career, and in many ways was in parallel to the, I think, evolution of the creative business. I first started out in marketing, advertising. That evolved soon, short after, into experience design, kind of that customer journey.
Sure.
And then more recently, product design. And so I think each of those are fascinating sectors of the industry, but even more so when you stitch them together for greater business outcomes and growth. So I spent the last 15 years or so on the digital health side. And I believe you have a great healthcare background as well. So you know very well the complexities of that space in terms of just the science behind the products in many ways, but also the regulation. Mm-hmm. Something that isn't celebrated enough, I think, is the data that is really untapped in that space. And we're seeing a lot of advancements in the healthcare, unlocking the creativity of data in the healthcare space going forward.
I think COVID was a huge push for so many, right? That suddenly our watches that we were using just to do our workouts were in some cases saving our lives, right? We got oxygen monitors and all different kinds of benefits as a result of what we were just wearing to work out. It was changing.
Completely agree. It's in many ways right at our fingertips, and we just haven't unlocked it. So that was my focus, and did some early use cases with Apple Watch, Google Glass, IBM Watson. And so that led me to at Adobe for the last 6 years or so and head up our strategic development for emerging technologies. And have to say, it's a quite exciting future that we're cautiously optimistic about. We have to be thoughtful on how we deploy some of these, as an industry, deploy some of these new emerging tech, such as AI generation. But overall, we're quite excited about the future, specifically what we really lean into, the creator economy.
So I'm fascinated by Adobe's use of AI when it comes to image search, right? Everyone's become really enamored with ChatGPT over the last couple of months. I know I put out a newsletter where I had ChatGPT write a poem to innovation storytelling. And made it rhyme. I don't think it's going to become a new hip hop trend. I think my poem was going to turn into some kind of hip hop masterpiece anytime soon, unfortunately. But tell us a little bit about this. I mean, in your book, Decoding the Metaverse, How to Expand Your Business Using Web3, you're diving into some of these topics. In Adobe itself, you're already experimenting with AI and image, right? So many of us come from this idea of like, how do I find great images, right? Now we're already putting this to use. Can you tell us a little more about that?
It's been fascinating to see how quickly things have advanced in some ways, but in many ways, this technology has been around for many years. Adobe's now 25 years old.
Wow.
And so we've been leveraging AI since the early days. There were some technology breakthroughs about 4 or 5 years ago called CANs and GANs, generative adversarial networks, and essentially that allowed for AI models to generate, whether it be images, as we were just talking about, text, video, and 3D. So we think about AI generation from an experience design standpoint in those 4 horizons: text, image, video, and 3D. The irony or paradox is the first one out of the gate is the text from an industry standpoint. And that's the most complex in many ways because of all of the semantics of the English language. We're delving deep into the image generation. We like to think that we have a unique perspective on it. We come obviously from a creative standpoint, but we also have Adobe stock. So we have hundreds of millions of images that we can pull from, train the system on, and then create some derivative AI generation out of. But we're equally excited that we're being very thoughtful in terms of provenance that is so important. Being a creative company, a platform that celebrates the creators, we want to be very thoughtful on how can we give rights where the right is due from the originator of the content. So we're being very diligent in thinking out the use cases and implications of technology like that.
So let's talk about, when you look at your own emerging products, let's call it portfolio. When you think about that, how are you getting people on board internally at Adobe to try out these new ideas? What's the process inside? How do you get people excited about taking a leap into something that sounds spooky, or does it? Are you getting enough customer feedback that says, yes, please give us more?
Yeah, we approach it from many different ways. A few that have really resonated in terms of effectiveness is we like to think of ourselves as customer zero. So we use our products to make our products. We're also big internal alpha and beta users. So before we even, share anything publicly, we're all using it for weeks, months, years beforehand, just to really pressure test it. So Adobe is made up of creators, and so we're using those tools to help create future innovation, which is a really kind of meta way of thinking.
So you're the alpha.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
You're pre-alpha, effectively.
Yes. And then the kind of the alpha or the beta is then we try to get early industry feedback. And so we do a lot of piloting, launch and iterating to really help guide the course for future product innovations, feature sets.
I
We're
collect
also
tons of data along the way.
all throughout the entire process. And
Yeah.
data is becoming an increasingly part of, as you refer to it, the storytelling of innovation. And so it's equal parts, this narrative, opportunity, TAM, but also the cold hard facts of data. And I think that the challenge for, organizations is how do you find that balance, that magical mix between all of those ingredients for a successful innovation cycle?
Yeah, I mean, that is the alchemy. So do you run up against some challenges around getting big ideas through at the board level or at the developer level or at the C-suite?
No, I wouldn't say challenges. I would say forces. There's a number of different dichotomies happening in terms of just the sheer speed of the marketplace is becoming an increasingly big focus on how do you create an innovation cycle of agility that can adapt to marketplace dynamics faster and faster. And so we've developed a number of systems, organizationally, ingestion of the data. For example, Adobe.com, now one of the most websites in the world, we run around 200 experiments per week to ingest data. So again, back to that, we're customer zero. We're always using our tools to refine insights. Another one is, I think because of in many ways, Adobe is a metaphor for the industry. We've got multiple disciplines, experts from, data science, designers, marketers, sales. And I think having a united vision on the purpose of our products really helps speed things. So those are two of the forces I think that we're constantly contemplating and thinking about.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your book, because Decoding the Metaverse is the name of the book, and we'll include the links in the show notes. Expand your business using Web3. You are taking us in this book chapter by chapter on how to begin thinking about the metaverse in a different way. So whether it's looking at the future of digital spaces or beginning to ask us to think about customer engagement and immersive experiences in perhaps a way that we haven't before. What do you think big businesses are missing out on not understanding the opportunities of the metaverse?
Yeah, much like you, Susan, I always say I'm in a privileged position where I get to speak with fascinating folks across the industry day in and day out, and get to see patterns starting to emerge before most, I think, can. And about 4 years ago, this term metaverse started popping up in conversations. So I almost felt it was a professional and personal obligation to delve a little deeper into it. And the deeper I got into it, the more I realized there was a lot of conflation of what is not the metaverse. And it's still forming before our eyes. But even more so, the conflation between the metaverse and Web3. So I think the hope for this book is really to provide a framework to decouple a lot of these themes. So I think that's currently the biggest challenge is there's just a lot of misunderstanding around this very nebulous term that we hadn't used, previously in cultural.
Can you do that for us? Chris, can you help for my audience just break down the difference for us as business folk? Where does this metaverse versus Web3 break down?
Yeah, definitely. And, I referenced a lot of historical technologies. How did they define it? How did it went to market? And I always felt a little disheartened because I missed the early days of the internet, the formation of it. And I always felt it would have been fascinating to be part of that. So I almost seize the opportunity to help design the future. And I encourage everyone, this is a very rare moment. This is a generational opportunity to help define the future for the future we want. So I took great reference inspiration from DevOps about 10, 15 years ago.
Sure.
And it was in a similar space where it was so encompassing that they intentionally didn't define it, but they tried to describe it. So I took that formula. I try not to define the metaverse because it's moving so quickly, but rather describe it in the book. But if forced, cornered to give a definition, very simply, the metaverse is the merging of the physical and the digital world for more immersive experiences. Kind of a simple all-encompassing definition. The metaverse in of itself, I characterize as 7 principles, right? Immersive 3D, real-time, ownership, interoperable, shared experiences, shared economy, and persistent. I'm not as religious as some others are. If you have 6 of the 7, I would characterize that as the metaverse. And so those principles are the metaverse. A question that's been coming up quite often is, how does an organization get into the metaverse? And my current, some of those into current projects or business models is a very easy way to tip the toe into the water. Where it gets more complicated is Web3. And this has really evolved over the last 24 months. First came Web 1, right? The late 90s, early 2000s, which was essentially a read-only environment. Next came Web 2, the mid-2000s, aka the social era, where it was read and write. So now you could participate in the creation of content. Next came Web 3.0, which is not to be confused with Web 3. Web 3.0 is this semantic web, this shareability of the content. Web 3, and when people talk about Web 3.0 or Web 3, currently they're referring to the Web 3 nomenclature. And Web 3 essentially is all about ownership or co-ownership. And similarly, break that down into 7 characteristics. It's about decentralization, blockchain, decentralized finance, smart contracts, DAOs, and NFTs. The irony of Web3 is it's so technically complex. The core promise of Web3 is that it's supposed to be very inclusive, but because of the complexity of it, it's become very exclusive. And so the hope of this book is to make it a little more inclusive that people can understand. So I break down those aspects of Web3 and Metaverse to really unleash this new era of creativity, innovation for businesses going forward.
Yeah. And I think what's fascinating to me about Web3 in terms of, thinking about my listeners and our audience of innovators is thinking about how do we get more people involved with helping us to create the best new products, ideas, and services that we hadn't before by incorporating more voices into the conversation. And Web3 provides an opportunity to do that while still helping those co-creators maintain a piece of ownership. And I think it's probably going to be one of the hardest parts for the walled corporation to think about how to allow other people in to help lift all of us up together. I'm really excited to see how that's going to pan out. How do you see that working?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a very important point. One of the biggest challenges is going to be the mind shift of the change management. In many ways, the metaverse and Web3 is a byproduct reflection of traditional ways of business no longer work. And so we're going to have to flip the script in every way from the foundation up. From my marketing background days, we always used to talk about, the industry would talk about, how can we monetize people's time or attention? As an example of how it's changing, it's now, how can we reward their time and attention? And so it's these mental shifts for go-to-market opportunities that's, I think, going to be the greatest challenge, let alone just understanding the technical capabilities going forward.
Well, and I think, the process of storytelling this internally is going to be very, very exciting, at least for me to watch. I'm curious, how do you bring these ideas to the boardroom when you're talking about Web3 and the metaverse at Adobe? How does the conversation, what does it sound like?
It really is going to be fascinating to see the evolution of storytelling as well. When I first started out in the industry, creativity was very much equated to creative ways of storytelling, which was reflective of the mediums of the time, right? TV primarily. And so now, what does creativity look like in a more immersive way, where it's multi-dimensional, it's 3D, it's persistent, it's real time, it's at scale, it's multiplayer. And so how do you create these stories that are more immersive? It's going to be, I think, unleashing this new era of the convergence of creativity and data going forward, both externally and internally. This is no longer about building PowerPoint slides to, tell a narrative. It's going to be about how can you really resonate, build rapport through creativity, but also data to resonate with the audience.
And I think this idea of data, for so many, if we're technical leaders, data feels very comfortable for us to tell a story. If we're creative people, sometimes data feels a little off-putting as a hindrance to the creativity that we want to communicate. But on some level, the machines are going to start crunching the data for us, right? And then, at least this is my dream, that I just get to tell the stories, right? I can feed in the data, and then I can get some really good feedback about what it's actually showing me. And then I can paint a beautiful picture with that data. Do you find it challenging sometimes? It sounds like it's the culture at Adobe that we are data-driven first, and we live by that to drive better user experience, to drive better creative outcomes. Am I getting that right?
I would say equal parts. One doesn't lead the other. You bring up an interesting point. There's a phrase going around: AI is not going to take away jobs. It's going to be people who know how to use AI that's going to take away jobs. I would push it one step further, or refine it a little bit more, that AI is going to change the way we work. And so to your point, I think that the creativity is going to be coming from what are the prompts that you enter for the extraction of the output, or what is the orchestration of the tapestry of the technologies that are using for the output. So really, truly exciting times going forward, both for internal business, innovation, but also the outward product or service coming out of this.
So what's the next great innovation story we're going to be hearing from Adobe that we should watch this space for?
Thank you. We're leaning heavily into what we call the 4 horizons of Gen Tech. The first one being generative text, the second one being generative images, the third one being generative video, and then the fourth one being generative 3D. With 3D goes hand in hand with personalized experiences at scale in the metaverse, which is going to be, I think, a mind-bending experience in a very short time. I think the industry is just waiting for that iPhone moment, the tipping point for a piece of hardware for the broad adoption as an on-ramp into the metaverse. So once we get that hardware, which is infinitely complex, and we're nearing it as an industry from some of the conversations I'm having, I think that's going to be the tipping point going forward.
Yeah, I'm just dying to step into Avatar. I just want to hang out, and I want to go to that amazing tree, and I want to plug my tail into it and, see what the earth has to tell me about my life. But I feel like you're right. It's the complexity of that. And hopefully it won't be this headgear, right? Yeah. That winds up making us feel like we're, on a blind mission into the future that makes us feel very insecure and uncomfortable, but that we'll get there.
Extend that thought.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's this misunderstanding that the more immersive experience will be solely virtual, but the reality, no pun intended, will be it's a new reality where it's the fusion of the virtual and the physical world. So it's not meant to be an escape from reality. It's an augmentation, amplification of physical and virtual reality together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw the new commercial from Meta, what was Facebook, right? Where it's firefighters who are now seemingly able to determine where is the hottest spot in the house or where someone is trapped in the home, right? So that their fireman's shield, as they're walking into a burning building, will actually direct them to the most acute areas that need help, or that a surgeon could identify that little seen tumor as he's picking out the larger one that we weren't able to see before because of this augmented reality that we're able to dive into. So yeah, yes. So you don't just have to become part of the Navi. I suppose you could actually become a better firefighter, a better surgeon or such as a result of your work.
Just to underscore that, I'm a firm believer the B2B space is having a moment where it's ushering in innovation faster than the consumer space. And so the metaverse is a great use case for B2B because in many cases, to your examples, they're probably already wearing some hardware, some safety glasses, a helmet. And so if you can infuse technology into that already habit, I think that's where we'll get some quick adoption. And we're seeing that already in the construction space, the healthcare space as well.
What a shift, right? From the original glass holes, right? They were originally called, right, in Silicon Valley, into actually putting that technology to use. Well, Chris Duffey, this has just been a fascinating conversation. Before I let you go, though, I always ask my guests 3 questions on the hot seat. So question number 1, what is the greatest innovation of all time in your estimation?
The smartphone.
The smartphone. Yeah. Okay. And question number 2, if you could join any innovation team, we're dispelling the myth that anybody gets this done alone, any innovation team in the course of human history, which team would you have joined?
The metaverse. I think the metaverse is going to be one of the most profound innovations of our. So we're seeing it before our very eyes.
And what is something that absolutely drives you nuts, or you simply just existed in the world that if you could invent, you would?
Traffic.
You would eliminate traffic.
Yeah, we've got the data, right? We're getting pretty good at it. Let's
spoken like a true now transplanted, right, from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Go Badgers. But Chris Duffey, thank you so much for joining me. I hope everyone will check out your new book, which is just phenomenal. If you haven't yet picked it up, Decoding the Metaverse, Expand Your Business Using Web3. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Susan.
Hey, innovators. If you are planning an offsite or a quarterly meeting or an end-of-year town hall, ask yourself if your story is straight, if you know what you'll be sharing with the rest of your community and your stakeholders. If not, I'd love to help you get a great story in place, a real business narrative that can help you and turn you into a fantastic storyteller. I bring keynotes, workshops, one-on-one coaching and consulting to your next event to help make it the best it's ever been. Just shoot me an email at hello@innovationstorytellers.com. Now you might be asking, Susan, why innovation storytelling? Well, the truth is that an innovation story told well not only breaks down communication barriers so you can drive change and new growth, but it also helps other people remember and champion your work. And it propels your best ideas forward faster to secure you the runway, resources, and recognition you so richly deserve. In other words, stories are memory-making devices that significantly reduce the time it takes for you and your innovation to be understood. But like many leaders, you probably never got the memo that storytelling skills would be central to your success. Well, I've got some good news for you. It's not too late because I've got you covered. Whether you need an expert to come and speak to your innovation leaders, you need training in the art and method of innovation storytelling, or you just need the support and guidance of a consultant who can get you where you want to go in less time, visit www.susanlindner.com today to learn more and to set up a call to discuss your needs. I'm so looking forward to connecting with you and to helping you tell a great innovation story. If you liked what you heard so far, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. And leave us a comment. Tell us what you think of this episode. We'd love to hear from you. And if you didn't like what you've heard, just forget everything I've said.